Program now, Ryan Anderson. Ryan is with the Heritage Foundation, and he is the co-author of "What Is Marriage, Man and Woman: A Defense." How you doing, Ryan?
Good. Thanks for having me on today.
I get the title of your book right?
Yes, it's What is Marriage, Man and Woman in Defense. It's something that I wrote with a classmate of mine at Princeton, Sharif Girgis, and then a professor of ours at Princeton. There's one conservative professor at Princeton, Robbie George.
Yeah.
And it's a book that we wrote really to explain why reason, the best of reason, also supports the conclusion that marriage is the union of a man and a woman.
You wrote an article, an excellent article, a few weeks ago. It's called. You're responding to this idea that laws that have been being proposed in states like Arizona, Kansas, Mississippi, and others that would protect Christian business owners in particular from having to provide services for homosexual weddings where these are now legal. And we've documented, we've talked about many times what happened with the florist and the baker and the photographer in Colorado, New Mexico, and Oregon. They were punished by their state governments because they were Christian business owners, small businesses, but they said, listen, we can't, our convictions, our Christian convictions won't allow us to participate in this, quote, ceremony or marriage and wedding, and so we'll have to decline. Well, that wasn't good enough. They were taken to court, or not to court necessarily, but they were taken before state agencies and fined and disciplined and told they needed, in the case of Oregon, they needed to be rehabilitated. So you've written an article in response to that and what's going on. You want to tell us about it?
Sure. The way you describe it is exactly right. There are several instances now where we've seen bakers, florists, photographers, innkeepers, many of the professional industries that intersect with the wedding business. And what they've said is, look, we have no problem taking portraits or baking cakes for citizens with same-sex attractions. We have no problem serving gays and lesbians.
Right.
What we object to is using our artistic talents to bake a wedding cake or to make the floral arrangements or to take the pictures and to tell the story of a same-sex wedding, because we don't think a same-sex relationship is a marriage. And so it has only really to do so far with the marriage aspect. And they're saying, look, let the same-sex couple that's going to have a ceremony go to a different photographer, a different florist, a different baker. We're not getting in the way of their freedom to do that, but they shouldn't get in the way of our freedom to choose, what sort of wedding-related services we provide. And we don't want to use our God-given gifts of photography or baking or floral arrangements to tell a story about marriage that we think is false. We don't want to use our God-given gifts in our professional lives to undermine what we believe to be the God-given truth about marriage.
Ryan, in the article that you wrote, you were discussing the proposed law in Kansas. Well, as it happens, the law in Arizona to do the same kind of thing was vetoed by the governor. And two questions. Number one, is the Kansas proposed law, is it similar to the one in Arizona, and where does that stand in the legislative process today?
Sure. The two laws are slightly different. The Arizona law was a state-level RFRA. RFRA stands for Religious Freedom Restoration Act. And this is a law that was passed at the federal level, championed by Chuck Schumer and Ted Kennedy, and signed into law by Bill Clinton. This was a bipartisan piece of legislation that passed unanimously in the House of Representatives. It passed by 97-3 in the Senate. And then President Clinton signed into law back in 1993. And we have lived under RFRA for 20 years now, and the sky has not fallen. Arizona passed a state version of this bill back in 1999. And then last month, they were trying to clarify exactly who it protected. And they wanted to say that it was explicit in saying that the word person entailed corporate persons as well, so that it would protect the associations that people form, businesses, nonprofits, charities, things like that, and that it would protect them against lawsuits from non-governmental agencies. And the type of protection it provided was not a blanket protection. What RFRA says is that you can't impose a substantial burden on the free exercise of religion unless there's a compelling government interest that's being pursued in the least restrictive means possible. So the Arizona bill didn't say anything about who would win. It just said that a religious organization, a religious individual, an individual whose religion and is trying to run their business in accord with their religion can bring a claim to court to say that my religious rights have been violated, and then the court will adjudicate that claim saying, all right, well, was there a substantial burden? Was there a legitimate, compelling state interest, and was it being pursued in the least restrictive means possible? So to apply that to the photography situation, you could say, what is the compelling state interest in forcing every photographer to take same-sex wedding photos? And is forcing every photographer to take same-sex wedding photos the least restrictive way of ensuring that gay and lesbian couples get their pictures taken? So in this case, it's not clear how that challenge would survive. And that's probably one of the reasons why there was opposition to it. Those who want to make every photographer take every same-sex wedding photo don't want to see religious liberty be honored and protected the way that it ought to be.
And if I understand correctly, in the Arizona law, which was, they say, only 2 pages long, the words gay rights, gay marriage, it didn't even appear in there. It just gave standing for religious shop owners and business people to make a claim in court. And that basically all it did. Is that a correct understanding?
Yep, that's exactly right. The actual bill was only 2 pages, a short 2 pages at that, because all it was doing was taking the 1999 law that Arizona passed and clarifying that the word person applied to corporate persons as well. So it's a legal term of art that it would also protect businesses and charities and other associations, not just individuals, which is what they had intended to do in the first place, and that it would also protect in lawsuits where the government is not a direct party, but the government's enforcing those lawsuits.
And so, and the Kansas law went in a slightly different direction?
Yep. So what the Kansas law did was it said,
by the way, it's not a law, is it?
It has not passed.
Right.
No.
Okay.
So it's still, my understanding is that it is still pending vote in one of the houses there, one of the chambers. And what it said was that no one should be discriminated against by the government if they believe and they act on the belief that marriage is the union of a man and a woman. So what they're more or less saying is, if marriage were to be redefined, we don't want to see the government penalizing those who continue to believe the truth about marriage. So if the Supreme Court was to one day strike down the state marriage law that defines marriage as the union of a man and a woman, the government then has to recognize 2 people of the same sex that are in a relationship as a marriage, but we're not going to force other people to do that, and we're not going to punish other people who don't do that. That was what that law was trying to accomplish, more or less saying that what's at stake here is liberty. You have the right to live and to love how you want to, but you don't have the right to force other people into celebrating your relationship.
Right. Ryan, what do you say? We're talking to Ryan Anderson from the Heritage Foundation. What do you say to those who argue, well, this is the same as Jim Crow laws?
Yeah, so think about, I think that's a terrible smear that the left has been using on this, and it just tries to paint people who are in favor of marriage and the union of a man and a woman as if they're racist. And it's really an outrageous claim that should have no place in...
What were Jim Crow laws for those who are not old enough to know?
Sure. So the idea here is that what Jim Crow laws did was that they forcibly kept the races segregated. They used the law to keep the races apart. That is not at all what a bill that would just allow freedom. It would be free association and free contracts. Jim Crow was against free association and free contracts. It said that if a black and a white person wanted to do business with each other, they couldn't. What this law would do is it would say that you have to do business with the same-sex wedding, even if you disagree with the same-sex wedding.
So it's a false argument.
Opposite.
False argument. It's not the same thing. Not the same thing. And we've said all along, and I remember when Colin Powell said this before a congressional hearing 15 years ago when he was asked about allowing openly homosexual people into the military, and he was against it at the time. And he said, listen, skin color you can't compare somebody's skin color with somebody's sexual orientation. Two different things. One is benign and one is an action, So, I mean, but this confusion about that among the general American public is great. I mean, people have a lot of people have come to see, sexual behavior as the same as being disabled or skin color or gender or race or ethnicity. I mean, and it's just simply not the same thing. Where can people read this article you wrote, Ryan?
Sure. If you go to the Heritage Foundation's website, www.heritage.org, you can find a large listing of articles that I've written there. Just look up my page. It's Ryan T. Anderson at the Heritage Foundation, and they'll list to a bunch of articles that I've written both for Heritage and for National Review and other outlets.
All right. Thank you, Ryan. We appreciate it.
Sure thing.
This is interesting. We're going to see where this, I don't know what other states are considering laws to protect the small Christian business owner. But, of course, Arizona, Jan Brewer vetoed that one.
There's so much pressure.
Yeah. Enormous pressure on her on that. And they who knows, they may come back with something else there. But these laws are being considered by state legislatures to protect people, as we've talked about here the last few minutes. We will be back. Some incredible stories coming up in the next hour on this program with our guests. Stay with us.